Welcome to HR Voices. A podcast for independent HR and people professionals and the businesses they support. HR Voices is brought to you by the expert team at HR Independence Limited. We hope you enjoy.
Hi there, and welcome to another edition of HR Voices podcast. I'm your host, Charlotte Allfrey, and I'm accompanied by Mary Asante, my usual partner in crime.
Hello.
And hi there. And we also have Anabela Yourell with us today. And this is hi, giving us a lovely wave. And she's going to just help us conclude the mini-series on the consultant's journey. And there's a reason, really, because we wanted to talk to Anabela about the fact that actually she's done something a little bit different, and we'll let you tell her a little bit about that. But she's got a very different journey to most of us, and we think you'll find it quite interesting. So, Anabela, just introduce yourself, say hello, and tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, hi. So I'm Anabela Yourell. I am an independent HR consultant and run my business, Stress-Free HR, and also run 2 exercise gyms, which is what I suppose you're talking about being slightly different. So I've been running my consultancy since 2017, and in 2022, I had this crazy idea that I was going to requalify and buy the gym that I was already part of, and then bought another one and have plans to buy some more. So that's me.
It's taking the wellbeing strategy to a whole new level, isn't it?
It is a little bit. Yeah, got to look after yourself.
Okay, so tell us about how you got into HR, because I know you're actually quite similar to a lot of people in that you sort of fell into it a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah, so I started a computer science degree at King's College University way back when, long time ago now. Got to the end of the second year, got 3/4 of the way through the second year and realised that I didn't actually like the subject I was doing. Before I told my parents I was going to break their heart and quit my degree, I went and got myself a job because I knew that my dad would say to me, "Oh, just because you've quit your degree, don't think you're going to be sitting at home doing bugger all," you know. So I went and got myself a temporary job just whilst I assessed what I was going to do. That job happened to be in HR. Never heard of HR before. Told my dad that I had another job to go to, and he was all right with that for the time being. Ironically, reapplied for uni to do languages, but actually really enjoyed working in HR. So I scrapped that. But it was only a 1-year placement I had with this temporary job. And when I got to the end of the year, I wanted another HR job. But because I didn't have this CIPD qualification, I couldn't get another one. So I ended up going back and doing a postgrad in human resource management and got my CIPD qualification and have worked in HR since basically 2001. It's a long time now. I can say it's been over 20 years. Ouch.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. There's a few of us that can say that, but we'd stop counting at 20, don't we? Just say it's over 20 years.
Over 20 years, that's it.
How many over?
Yeah, that's it. So that's effectively how I fell into HR. And that's a problem when you fall into a job, is that you keep doing it and you progress in your career. Doesn't necessarily mean it's where your passions lie. And I suppose I was good at what I did, so I stayed in it and I progressed in my career up until the point that I was then almost forced to set up my own consultancy, in that I left London. I had 2 children 20 months apart. My childcare costs were £3,000 a month, so that was a good enough reason to leave the city. And with 2 young children, the nursery calling all the time, I started getting anxiety every time the phone rang, thinking, crap, it's funny, you've been in that management position where you are flexible with your staff, and there does come a point where you have to have that conversation where you are accommodating and etc. But there comes a time that you have to kind of have that conversation, say, look, it's happening a bit too frequently. Can your partner perhaps take some of the time off to go look after the children when they're ill? That kind of conversation. And I felt like that conversation maybe was coming. So I had this crazy idea one day in the garden, thinking, what am I going to do with my future? How am I going to reduce my anxiety and stress levels with the phone ringing, with the kids having to be picked up from nursery? And I went to my husband, I said to him, how would you feel if I quit my job and set up my own consultancy? And that was that. I went back to work. That was on a Saturday, went into work Monday and quit my job. 3 weeks later, my husband was made redundant. So
Oh my goodness me.
nothing like a change in your circumstances to give you a kick up the bum to make sure that what your plans are work. And that was a good 6 years ago now. And I'm delighted to have surpassed some of those statistics about businesses when they're set up, that they fail in the first year, they fail in the 5th year. So I've done that. I've managed to get through those. Next milestone is the 10 years. So we'll see.
Well, you've definitely had the 7-year itch, haven't you? Because you're starting to do something else now.
That's it. That's it.
Gosh, okay,
Thank you for sharing your background, Anabela, and very interesting. And I think you touched on a couple of things there, which is affect a lot of consultants on their journey, especially when someone's been on maternity leave or have some sort of other care responsibilities, either for the elderly or for their children, and get to the point where it becomes almost impractical to balance their full-time job or even sometimes a part-time job with their home life and commitments. And so think really hard and go, actually, I'm going to have to start my consultancy so that I can get better work-life balance or have that flexibility. But you also touched on a really good point around having agreed with your husband that you're giving up your day job, so to speak, and to start a consultancy journey within a short space of time, him being made redundant, then that would put you in a position where you'll probably seriously panic because, oh my goodness, we've gone from 2 secure incomes to no income. And so really need to do something and to do that first. So if you take your mind back, what really kept you going rather than to run back to say, apply, I'm here for another job?
I think it's fair to say that anybody who sets up their consultancy still searches those job boards on a regular basis for quite some time after they've been, I think I was maybe into my 2nd year, I was still having a look, debating whether or not I'd made the right decision, because when you have that guaranteed income every month, it's a different weight lifted off your shoulders. But it's all about the opportunity, and it's about looking at why you set up your business in the first place. I would class myself now as unemployable, mainly because I like to take my children to school. I like to pick them up. I like not having to ask permission. I take the 6-week summer holidays for the last 4 years. I've spent every single summer holiday, the whole 6 weeks, in Portugal at my parents' because I can, because as a family unit, we can. So when I set up my business back then, the driving force was that I didn't want to have to ask my employer for permission to go and collect my sick kids from nursery, because this nursery wouldn't allow them in the building because they would infect everybody else, because if my employer said, well, no, you can't have the time off, and the nursery said, well, your kids can't come to school, what exactly was I supposed to be, what was I supposed to do with that? And this way my business facilitated that problem, and it wasn't the only thing. So 8 months old, my daughter had a squint. For the next 3 years of her life, she had hospital appointments every 2 months. I worked it out that if I had to have taken a holiday for every single appointment she's had in her lifetime now, because not only that, she also developed epilepsy, and so there's other things, we are frequently backwards and forwards to the hospital. I wouldn't have any holiday. I wouldn't have any time to myself, and so my businesses actually have given me the freedom to choose where I spend my time and what's important to me without having to ask for permission. And frankly, that to me is priceless.
And there's a whole lot of issues to be able to explore there. And as Charlotte would say, that's probably a whole other podcast around flexibility from employers. And I think it's really important to highlight that. And as HR people, it's good not to just brush it and touch on it and go, which is lots of companies will preach and will have policies and processes and procedures in place for flexibility and flexible working. But like you've highlighted, if they have a child with some sort of illness or health issues or anything like that, which requires frequent appointments, that become a whole new ball game. And it's very few employers who are understanding and patient enough to be able to support that employees throughout or those employees throughout that journey to get them to where they need to get to. So I think I just want to really make a point to any employer, any manager, any team leader listening, that is quite important. You may not have, if you were in employment, discuss with your employer that, hey, these are my issues, these are my concerns, because having been in HR, and like you said, having sat on the other side, managing other people with those requirements, it gets to a certain point that the conversation comes to say, this is just not working for us and we need to do something else. So it's quite important to keep dialogue, communications, etc. But more importantly, give your employees the assurance when you can. Of course, you're a business and you're there to make profits or to run a successful business, etc. And it has to be within reason. But being open and being understanding and actually demonstrating that support goes a long way to help employees going through that. So I just wanted to make that a side point.
And I completely agree, Mary, that if you, from the business point of view, if you trust, accommodate your employees within reason, obviously, but as much as possible, you end up getting so much more from your employee as a result. And I think sometimes employers can be quite blinkered. Some employers, they don't see the value of giving that flexibility to their employees who need the help. It's not a choice. The hospital appointments, for example, they're not a choice. They have to be there. They're there for a reason. And if you ask a parent to make a choice between their child or their employer, the child will always come first. But if, like you said, if there's open communication, if there's a bit of give and take between the two, then the relationship between employee and employer gets stronger. So yeah, I agree. But certainly running your own business takes away that problem. And then you have the flexibility to do what you need to do. And I'll add on that as well, that the majority of my clients know that my daughter has epilepsy, for example, know that I have a hospital appointment because I'm very transparent with them. So when they need me, for example, on Tuesday, we had a 4-hour appointment. And, one of my clients called while I was there. So I sent them a quick message just saying, sorry, I'm at the hospital at the moment with Emily. I'll give you a call when I'm done. They don't have a problem with that. Because we have a relationship, an open relationship. They understand that I run a business, have other clients, have family, but I'm very open and transparent with them. And that's the kind of relationship that I chose to build within my consultancy, within my clients. And I think that's quite important.
I think it's really important. I have a similar relationship with my clients. And I think, it's pitched on the basis that they want me when they want help. And that's not always very easy to pin down. And I want to work flexibly and they want the services flexibly. So between us, we'll work through it. And that's quite a good way to manage the business, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, sadly, your story is very familiar. And I think a lot of people that are self-employed or on consultancy journeys of some kind have come into that journey and come from that position of, I can't juggle everything. I can't keep going in and begging for time off, and I can't bear the rolling of the eyes and the, again, time off again. And that's probably why the sector's quite female-led, I think.
Yeah. Anabela, I also know that when the growth points for your HR consultancy specifically was when you started niching. Can you tell our listeners or our viewers a little bit about what led you to that specific journey and how it transformed your business?
Absolutely. I think that was about 18 months to just under 2 years into my consultancy. I set up my consultancy out of necessity. Yeah. And I think that's quite important to distinguish because some people set up their consultancies through choice. They've got to a point in their career and they're like, do you know what? I think I'm going to set up a HR consultancy. And then other people do it because they have no, like, it's not that they don't have to know a choice, but they're kind of forced in that direction like I was. There was a circumstances that put me in that place. So when I set up my consultancy, it literally was, today I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to start it up tomorrow. So there wasn't much thought process that went into that, right? So I didn't know anything about networking. I didn't know anything about how you market yourself. Zero was where I started from. So, I started thinking, well, who do I want to work with? And so I used my experience of where I'd worked previously. I worked in tech startup and I really enjoyed that environment. So I thought, oh, I want to go into, I don't know, target funding companies who put money into these tech startups, for example, and be their consultant. And I had this big idea about that's how I was going to do. And I thought, okay, well, I'll work with businesses of about 10 to 20, maybe 25, 30, 50 employees. Yeah, I was so wrong. I was so wrong with how I was thinking, because the problem I had, and then I had that other problem that I was like, you know what? I'll just work with anybody who'll pay me. Yeah. If you pay me, I'll work with you. Don't care what size you are. The problem when you have a really broad client base that you're not really clear about who you want to work with is that you find it then really difficult to market yourself, really difficult to put your proposals together because you don't really know what services you're offering, because bigger companies might want one type of service, smaller companies might want other types of services. Your pricing structure, again, can vary depending on the type of client or the sector of the client or the size of the client, or, that kind of stuff. So I had all these challenges up until that point. And then somebody recommended I listen to a book called The Pumpkin Patch, I think it's called, by Mike Michalowicz. And it was about this prize pumpkin, growing the prize pumpkin. And basically it was talking about niching. What is your prize pumpkin? It doesn't mean you can't have more pumpkins in your patch, but you've got that one prize pumpkin, and that's the one you really focus on. Everything else can still happen, but what is your prize pumpkin? So I'm listening to it on audio, and I'm walking the dog at the time. It's December time. This is how well I remember it, because it was really that moment of clarity. And I'm walking the dog, and the book is saying to me, as I'm listening to it, think about the services that you frequently offer. And I'm thinking, actually, what do I do a lot of? Employment contract templates, handbooks, all the stuff I hate, boring stuff, the policy stuff. Some people like policy, me not so much, but it was the type of work I was getting, a lot of it. And I'm thinking, okay, so who are the type of people who need that kind of stuff? Typically people who are taking on their first employee or their very small businesses. So I actually niched down to businesses who were taking on their first employee. And then I realized I niched too narrow. That was kind of too far to niche. So then I went businesses with one, kind of the starting point, taking on their first employee, up to 10 employees. And I sat within that niche. And I'd say that 90% of my clients sit within that. And then the other 10% are bigger than that. And once I did that, so that was in December, by August, the following year, I had grown by about 300% in terms of my client base, which was quite good. I was quite happy with that. It was the turning point in my business, if I'm honest. It was the point when I stopped looking for other jobs, stopped scanning the jobs board, because I didn't feel threatened anymore, because my business finally had taken a turn. And then when I when I networked, I knew exactly what I was saying to my fellow colleagues. Do you know a business of between 1 and 10 employees, or do you know somebody taking on their first employee? And that, for me, then it just transformed my business, which was great.
It's great. I mean, often a lot of the marketeers will say that clarity is everything, isn't it? And that you really need to understand your purpose and what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was lost for a very long time.
Wow. Well, I remember you telling us about that a long time ago on another session, and I remember thinking, gosh, you really did have that light bulb moment.
Yeah, and it was needed.
Yeah, gosh. Okay. And so in terms of your journey and from the HR perspective, what was your biggest challenge?
HR wise?
Yeah.
What was my biggest challenge? That's a good question. I'd say my biggest challenge was doing work that I didn't enjoy, because you got no choice, because people are paying you. And whilst it's all very well saying, you work for yourself so you can pick and choose what you do, the reality is, mm, you can do that when you've got a lot of clients and you get a lot of money every month, and then you can pick and choose. So I can genuinely say I'm now at that point that I have passed on quite a lot of work, mainly because I don't have the capacity to do it anymore. And I cherry pick the ones I want to do and pass the stuff that I don't want to do. But there have been times in the past where I've really had to dig deep to do the work because I really just didn't want to do it. My husband, as I said earlier, was made redundant 3 weeks after I set up my business. He did go back into work briefly, but because we've got two young children, and at the time, but this was before COVID and before Zoom was acceptable, he took the role of looking after the kids, taking them to nursery, looking after them when I was away and stuff like that. So in the 6 years, he has been not working for 5. So I have maintained our lifestyle through my businesses with only one of us working. So that probably was quite the challenge as well.
Yeah,
Staying
because
afloat.
you're not trying to just bring income for you, you're trying to bring it in for 2 of you.
4 of us.
Well,
Because at the time I had nursery fees as well to pay
Oh gosh.
and stuff like that. So it's so not anymore, thank God. Now they're at school, that's finished. But still, there's still, after school clubs and all the rest. But so the challenge, I suppose, was staying afloat and not listening to your imposter. The imposter syndrome can be really strong, and doing work that you don't particularly enjoy, but you've got no choice to do.
Yeah, and that's hard to keep motivation, isn't it, actually, day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what as well, it's really difficult to be disciplined. Even if you are disciplined, I'd like to think I'm quite a disciplined person, but when you work for somebody else, you got them looking over your shoulder almost, even if they're not that type of person to look over your shoulder, and they let you kind of get on with your work. You're being paid by someone else to do the work, and so therefore you do it in a timely fashion, that kind of thing. But when you work for yourself, you've got to be disciplined to make sure that the work gets done, and that you do your marketing, and that you do your accounts, and that all of what goes with running a business. Because if you don't, you can get very complacent very quickly, and it all builds up, and then you get stressed. Been there as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing those. Now let's talk about the key point in this conversation, which is you're transitioning into. So when was your light bulb moment of, actually, I'm doing HR consultancy, I'm doing it successfully now, and I'm getting an itch to start something else. And how did you go through that journey to even decide what that something else is?
Okay, so about 2019, so I set up in 2017. So 2019, I was having a conversation with my fitness coach at the time. He used to run residential boot camps locally, and he just happened to mention that, we could go into business, and I thought, okay, let's do a bit of research. I just didn't have the £1.5 million to go buy a house that would facilitate that process. So the idea was shelved. It didn't go away completely, but it was parked for another time. And not last year, so this would have been 2021, on one of our summer holidays in Portugal. Eric and I, my husband, we always take a couple of days every holiday to strategize the next year. And when you've got kids, your year starts in September when the school starts, and as part of those conversations, we always talk about retirement. It's always good to look into the future and plan or dream. I like to dream. I think that's good for you. So we talk about, and so we were one year in 2021, we were in the Algarve, and I was saying to Eric, do you know what? That residential boot camp we were talking about, because we plan to retire to Portugal. Why don't we kind of semi-retire to Portugal and open it up in the Algarve? And anyway, we had that conversation. We came back to the UK, got on with business, carried on our lives. And in 2020, I had joined Fitter Body Ladies when it opened here in Daventry as a member. I'd already lost my weight, I was fit, but I needed somewhere else to go. So I joined as a member. And I got quite friendly with the franchisor because she was running the gym. She had a few HR problems, so I helped her out. Ironically, she was with one of the bigger consultancies. We know which one, if I just say that. And she knew I worked in HR, so she came for a second opinion. And as a result of that, we got quite friendly and we talked. And so I said to her, how long does it take to become a fitness coach? Because one of the barriers that I'd had was thinking that it took years to become a fitness coach. And she said, well, a couple of months. I was like, come again? What do you mean a couple of months? Yeah, because yes, exactly. So there are different levels. Level 2 is fitness coach. Level 3 is personal trainer. And to do what I'm doing now, you only need level 2. And I did. I decided. Anyway, so I went home and I said to my husband, well, if we do this thing, semi-retirement in like 10 years when the kids go to uni, because that was the plan, wouldn't it sound more credible if I could say that I've been a fitness coach for 10 years? So I decided to sign up for the course. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, I had another brainwave, because that's what you do. And I said to my husband, wouldn't it sound more credible if I could say I'd been a fitness coach and owned a gym for 10 years when I come to do my semi-retirement plan? And so I went and had a chat with the franchisor. I knew the gym was up for sale because I'd had these conversations before with her. And yeah, so I did my qualification so I started in April, and at the end of May I qualified. So I did it within 8 weeks. And then on the 1st of August, I became the owner of Fit Body Ladies in Daventry. And then, yeah, and ironically, I went to Portugal on the 27th of July and took over the gym, and I wasn't even in the country. But that's the beauty of running a business, is that you don't actually have to always be in the business for it to operate and run. So yeah, so that was the start of my journey into the fitness industry. I chose to go into a franchise because I didn't have a fitness background, and I was brought into the franchise anyway, having been a member. And so there's a lot of support as a result from being part of this franchise. But it was the start of a journey. And if I'm honest, the reason why I went into the industry was because it was another business, not necessarily the type of work. I am very passionate about what I do in terms of the gym and supporting the ladies that I have as members and stuff like that. But the confidence that I had that I could do it was more because I had background in business from my consultancy, and I felt confident that I could grow a business, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, wow, well done.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And I know when we were talking in our little preamble before we started recording, that you felt you'd learned a lot of lessons along the way from running your business and your consultancy business that have been transferable and have given you a real insight into this new venture. So tell us a little bit about that.
One of the biggest lessons I learned was that it doesn't matter what you think your plans are, it might not pan out. So when I started my HR consultancy, my intention was that I would do that and then one day sell my business. Well, frankly, my business isn't ready to sell. And I don't think I'll ever sell it, to be honest, because my business, my HR business, solely relies on me. And I had the approach for years, systematize it, don't make it rely on you. I've got time. And then my life changed because I took a different direction. And frankly, I don't have the time to systematize it now, nor the desire, to be honest. And actually, if I take where I am now in my business, if I keep my retained clients for a couple more years, I'll make more money from the retainers than if I sold my business now anyway. So I'm quite okay with that. So I would say to any consultant setting up their business, if your intention is to sell, start systematizing as soon as possible. Putting things in place that don't rely on you, knowledge dump and all of that about how your processes work and what you do, so that if you find yourself in a situation that you want to let go, it's worth something. Because otherwise, my opinion is that if you start a business, the intention is to sell it, to make some money from it if you can. And I won't, in the traditional sense, from my business as a result of the direction that I took. I got complacent, thinking I had time. So that was a big lesson. That was a big lesson for me.
So having gone into the fitness with the plan that fits into your retirement plan, I suppose you almost certainly have systematized that one to ensure that when the timing is right, you cancel the one.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So the franchise already systematizes a lot. So that's good. It's one of the reasons why I went with the franchise, because it's all, a lot of it's done for you. But there are things that I've changed. There are things that are unique to the locations that we have. So I have now 2 locations, and my plan is 6 in 6 years. I talk about previously wanting to semi-retire. Not so sure anymore. That has also changed a little bit, because actually what I'm growing now in terms of my plans, I may be able to not need to semi-retire and be able to build the gym empire, let's call it, that I'm building, and be the maestro at the top, navigating things, and have my business just operate, independently without me, and continue to pay me handsomely for it. That's the intention, right? So again, that's the lesson, is that doesn't matter what you set out to do, sometimes things, they just don't go that way, and you change your mind and things get in the way. And I'm now, again, because of my children, I'm now thinking that the fitness industry things that I'm building might be a good avenue for one of my children, because of the difficulties that child has, might be a safe environment for them to grow their own career within, rather than having to navigate normal employment, let's call it. So things change, things are unpredictable, so yeah. I think what other lessons that I had as a result of taking on, but I don't think so much lessons, I think things reinforced, I think is the right way to put it. I am a big believer, I'm a big sharer, big believer in talking about your plans, talking about the things you want to do, because you never know who will help you or who knows who, and stuff like that. So don't be afraid, I suppose is my message. Don't be afraid to share. I think a lot of people don't want to share for 2 reasons. One, they're guarded and they don't want to share their information, but equally because they might feel embarrassed if things don't work out. And I remember when I started my HR consultancy, I put it on Facebook that I had, and I asked for help. I said, oh, if anybody knows any businesses. And an ex-work colleague reached out, and that first client was as a result of that one post I put out. And it's the same with my gyms. Frequently, I ask my members for referrals. Who do you know that might want to come and join you at the gym? And I think that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. I think actually it's a big strength that you can have. So
sign of strength. Yeah, I think you are absolutely right there. Asking for help, regardless of what you need that help for, is a sign of strength, because it does take a lot of courage to open up about something so close to your heart, so important to you, and to say yes. And I always say to people, going through when I'm doing leadership coaching, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And the worst is no one responds to that Facebook post, someone laughs, or someone ignores you. That's the worst, or say no to you. But the best that can happen out of that is what you've demonstrated, which is someone saying, hey, I know someone looking for help, and they'll be able to help you. Or actually, I know somebody in the fitness business, they may be able to share insights with you, or this and that. So it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely.
I think what's really good about your approach and ethos is that you're not afraid to challenge your assumptions, and you're not afraid to change things. I think there is a sense of a sense of worry around failure, but actually you sort of embrace that head on, and it's part of it's part of what you think about. You definitely look at the bigger picture and not afraid to change it.
It's really funny. I have a friend of mine who said to me, oh, Bella, it doesn't matter what you do, you always land on your feet. And if I'm honest, it annoys me a little bit, because it's not that I always land on my feet, because she's only noticing the things that I have been successful in. But there are many things that I have not been successful in. The difference between me and this particular friend of mine, who is a very good friend, by the way, is that I am not afraid to take calculated risks. Everything I do is calculated, you know, and I often think to myself, or I say to myself, what's the worst that can happen? If the worst that can happen is I lose my house or I lose my health, it's not worth it. But actually, when I spoke to my husband about quitting my job, and I said to him, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work. I'll go get another job. The same with the gyms. What's the worst that could happen? It doesn't work out. I sell the gyms, you know, but at least I can say I tried. And I don't live a lifetime of thinking, oh, I wish I'd done this or I wish I'd done that. Do you know what? Life is short, you know, and you can't, my parents, they always said to me, as long as you feel like you gave it 100%, then you haven't failed. Even if it doesn't work, the fact that you tried means you haven't failed. But don't fail to try. You know, that's the approach that I have.
Wow, you've done the top tips before we've even asked you to. Any other little nuggets in there that you think you could share on, you know, if you're thinking about starting a business, whether it's in consultancy or anything really, but, you know, how you go about that and, you know, what any advice you could give them?
Okay. Advice for people who are thinking about starting a business. It will never be the right time. It's a bit like having children. Doesn't matter how much money you save or what time of the year you think you're going to start it, it's never the right time. You're never ready. You've got to kind of pull that plaster off and just do it, you know. So that's definitely one thing that I'd say. It's okay to doubt yourself. We're only human, but you've got to recognize what it is that you're doing. Don't self-sabotage yourself. You know, ask other people for help, which we've already mentioned. Surround yourself with similar people in terms of, well, surround yourself, I think, sometimes with successful people. I have found in the past that if I hang around with people who are constantly negative, you find it really difficult to come out of that headspace. And I'm naturally quite a forward-thinking, positive person, and even I can get dragged into the negativity, and it is exhausting trying to turn that opinion around. So if you can, surround yourself with positive, successful people, because you will exude their way of being, and that helps. I would also suggest that you educate yourself. So, you know, I love Audible. Personally, if I pick up a book now, I fall asleep within the first paragraph. So Audible is my friend. I listen on walking the dog, when I'm cooking. You know, if I go for a run, I switch on my Audible instead of listening to radio or music. And there are lots of educational books out there, motivational books, that kind of stuff. Educate yourself. It's really important. And network, especially in the early years, network, but understand what you're networking for. Don't go and sell your services to a room. Build good, meaningful relationships. Help other people. I'm a big believer in givers gain. I'm a BNIer, but I'm not a BNIer because I advocate BNI. I'm a BNIer because I naturally am a giver, and I'm a big believer that if you do good out in the world, you will receive it back. I have done many pro bono HR things over my career, and I do it because it's good to help other people. And it sharpens your skills, by the way, I think, anyway.
Yeah, keeps it real, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, it gives me an edge over my competition sometimes, because I can see it from both sides, and it definitely helps my clients when I understand how the other side is thinking. So yeah, so there's a few things I think that hopefully will help people starting out or even already on their journey. And it's okay if you don't want to do HR anymore, if you've been doing it for a long time. I think that's really important as well. I didn't set out to do HR because I knew what it was. I fell into it, and I never really found the thing to fall out into something else until now. And at 43, I am still on my journey to move completely away from HR one day. Maybe, I don't know, it's in my blood, so I don't know if I can, you know, but we'll see what the future holds.
Thank you. That's really good, insightful tips and information. And I think, I don't know how you feel about it, Anabela, but I find that sometimes we talk to a lot of consultants through the, HR Independence Network. And, HR is quite a tough job, and it can be quite a tough job. So you can understand how sometimes people do sort of start to fall out of love with it a little bit, because it can be, a bit grueling at times.
Yeah, I think that
Mary, have you got
was...
any other questions for Anabela?
Sorry, I'm not
Anabela, go ahead.
a point.
No, I completely, I was just going to say, I completely agree with that. It's nice when your clients are forward thinking and come to you for good stuff. But the reality certainly in my experience as a consultant, it's usually for the not so good stuff, which can be quite a sad and depressing business to have to run if it's always negative. So trying to find a balance with clients who are forward thinking and positive against those that are more transactional and operational on the negative side does grind you down for a bit, which is why I feel more rewarded, let's say, doing the work on the gym side and helping people transform their lives in that way a bit more than I did in my HR consultancy.
I think to add to that is important. Self-care is very important. Well-being is very important. As HR professionals, we encourage and advocate that people and our clients, etc., take well-being seriously, look after the employees, etc. But one of the favorite questions I've always had is, who looks after HR? And as an HR professional within an organization, running your own consultancy, etc., you see that you take a lot on from your clients, from the employees, from all the interactions, etc. And it's a very tough gig, but you do need to pause to look after yourself, your own well-being and stuff. And it's very important when you're running a consultancy or running your own business, whether you are a one-person band or whether you are part of a small team, it can be quite lonely. That's why it's important to have a tribe around you of positive thinkers, like-minded positive thinkers, to support you, to be able to offload, to bound ideas off, and to build you up, to pick you up sometimes, so that you are not by yourself and you don't get into the deep, dark space for too long, which kind of grunts you down, take out all your energy, and then you find that, actually, I can't do this anymore, I can't do that anymore, or it's quite challenging, because depending on what you're doing, especially if you're involved in employee-related type issues, employee relations issues, it can get very emotionally draining.
Yeah.
And it's quite important to surround yourself in that sense, to be part of a community like the HRI community, or to surround yourself with like-minded positive people that you can just pick up the phone to jump on, go for a walk with, or do anything that you enjoy doing with, meet for coffee somehow when the time allows, and just offload. And then you have that space in your mind and in your body to be able to move on positively. So, yeah.
Great.
Right.
Okay. So thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your story and all your tips and knowledge and expertise. We really do appreciate it. And thank you, Mary, for joining me today. And thank you for listening and watching. And as always, if you want to get in touch with us here at HR Voices, you can do that via HR Voices at hrindependence.co.uk. We look forward to talking to you and bringing another podcast to you very shortly. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of HR Voices. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email us at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. Tune in next time.